But God, in his love and in his mercy and in his grace, he sent Jesus Christ to this earth to take on the sin that we deserve, to take on the death that we deserve, and take our place and die in that place for the perfect sacrifice. Verse 3 says, "And four great beasts," everybody say four beasts. We're going to go through those in succession. He says there was four great beasts. They came up out of the sea, different from one another. If we were to go to chapter 2, we would see this detail, this vision, this dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had, and he brings Daniel in to begin to interpret this dream. It's a recalling of chapter 2. Verse 4, it says, "The first was like a lion. It had eagle's wings." When we think about a lion, we think about strength. We think about dominance, and then if that's not enough, hey, let's tie some wings onto it, and we see that brings it swiftness and speed, and there's a lot of pride that's involved, and if you haven't figured it out by now, this lion with wings, it's talking about the kingdom of Babylon. We have the kingdom of Babylon. First was like a lion, and it had eagle's wings, and then I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. If we were to go back to Daniel chapter 4, we would see where this very thing happens. We have the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. He was plucked from his perch. If you remember, he was standing up on top of his palace, and he looked down, and when he began to say, hey, all these things are from me, I have created all these things, where he was dealt a dose of humility. God plucked him off from where he was, and he set him out with the wild beast, and he began to roam around for 7 years until he came to his senses. It's pretty cool if you were to go to the Paramount Museum in Berlin, Germany. Where do they get this imagery from? Where do they get this lion and the eagle's wings from? Back then in Babylon, if you were to walk through the Ishtar gates, you would see this exact figure, the lions and the wings, as you walk into the city of Babylon. How do we know this? Archaeologists have unearthed this ancient city Babylon in what we call modern-day Iraq, and they have taken those and they have kind of reconstructed those, and they have put them in a museum. It's absolutely beautiful. You should go take a look at them. But can I point something out to you? You're going to see animals that we're going to talk about and some imagery that we go through throughout this time, and I'm going to tell you nothing has changed during our time that we have. Right? If we're to talk about the USA, what is the animal that symbolizes the USA? The eagle, right? If we're to talk about sports teams, if we're to talk about any kind of team that we're on, even cities and countries and states, what are a lot of them symbolized by? An animal. There's a lot of imagery that comes into this, and the spirit of Babylon that still existed then, guess what? It still exists today, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Second one, verse 3, it says, then Daniel, I'm on the wrong one. Verse 5, it says, behold, another beast, a second one like a bear. We talk about strength. We talk about ferocity. We talk about him moving with weight. And behold, another beast, a second one like a bear. It was raised up on one side. Why one side? We'll get to that here in a second. It had 3 ribs in its mouth. What are the 3 ribs? We'll get to that in a second. In its mouth, between its teeth, and it was told, arise and devour much flesh. So I want you to know that right there. Arise and devour much flesh. It was allowed to conquer, but it's still under God's sovereign authority. Everything that we're going to read today, guess what? It is under God's sovereign authority. He is surprised by nothing that takes place. It was like a bear. It was raised up on one side, referring back to the Medo-Persian Empire that took place, and it destroyed Babylon. But we see where one side of that was very lopsided. The Persians stepped up and they gained complete control of this empire, and the Mede Empire was no more. So we have this one-sided lumpy bear that is the empire of Persia. And we get these 3 ribs in its mouth. That is speaking directly of the empires that the Persian Empire has destroyed previous to this. So we have 2 things that have taken place in this Daniel chapter 7 so far. These things occurred when Daniel was there. The next 2 things that we're going to talk about in accordance with Daniel have not happened yet. Today, they have happened. It's beautiful prophecy. It's the way that God speaks to us and reveals things to us. The third one, he says, after this, I looked and behold another like a leopard. Anybody ever dealt with a leopard before? They're pretty fast, huh? If you get in a cage with one, what are you supposed to do? Run. Very good. Somebody's smart enough to say it. You run from leopards. If this leopard was not enough to talk about how swift and how fast that they are, it's got wings too. And if that's not enough, then it's got 4 heads with it as well. We have this beast that comes along and it moves with such swiftness and it overtakes everything. And this empire that we're going to talk about here is the Empire of Greece. The Empire of Greece. This was a very fast-moving empire that was taken over, that it took over everything. Alexander the Great, you may have heard of him. Alexander the Great, he conquered the world as we know it in 10 years. 10 years. Talk about a swift movement. In that time, he set up 4 pillars. We've talked about these before. Hellenism, it came along, and he set up these pillars of education, of sports, of entertainment, and healthcare. Last time I checked, we still have those pillars that are in place today, right? And we abide by each and every one of them. We have that takes place, and he got bored, and he sat down, and then he died at the ripe old age of 33. And we see these 4 heads that take place in the scripture, and it refers to these 4 rulers that come along after this, and the kingdom of Greece is divided amongst them, and we see that it becomes fragile, and there are some cracks that develop in this. But this prophecy was not fulfilled in Daniel's lifetime, and I'm going to tell you once again that God is not surprised by anything. He sees and knows all. And this is all just a reenactment to God. The 4th one says, after this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast. Listen to the verbiage on this one. The imagination comes forth. It says, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. This empire that we're going to talk about next is the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was the longest standing empire in history. If you know anything about it, it lasted for about 1,700 years. You're like, what's the big deal about that? Let's look at America. We have existed for about 250 years. You can imagine the source and the power and everything that came with this empire that they maintained for 1,700 years. Why do we talk about this empire? Why is it so important? Why does God reveal this to Daniel? This empire is who would be in charge when this man named Jesus Christ would enter the world as a baby. As we go on here from verse 8, he says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one. What do you think the little one is? Named Jesus. This is where we get into the Antichrist. Everybody say Antichrist. It was a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Who is this little horn? It is the Antichrist. And here's what the Antichrist does. He comes along and he opposes, and he tries to replace anything and everything that Jesus brings about. He is Antichrist. And we can see in this time, and when we're reading this is something that hasn't taken place yet. All of these other empires have fallen, but this Antichrist and this new world order has not came in to reality yet. But I'm going to tell you this. The spirit of the Antichrist is well at work in our culture, in our world today. Can I tell you that again? There's a difference between the Antichrist who is going to come, is going to bring destruction, and there's a difference between the spirit of the Antichrist. When Satan was cast out of heaven, him and 1/3 of the angels began to roam this earth and to try to devour it, to mess up families, to bring about destruction in any way that they can. And these are the spirits who are with us today, who cause destruction, who cause chaos in our lives. But I want you to know that there's some good news. Everybody say good news. As we look at this next one, we look at the Ancient of Days. the Ancient of Days. Verse 9 says, "And I looked, there were thrones that were placed, and the Ancient of Days, that is God, he took a seat. His clothing was white as snow." Here comes a lot of the imagery that we're talking about here. His clothing was white as snow. That has to do with purity. It has to do with holiness. It says, "And the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames." This speaks directly to the judgment that is going to come from God Most High when he sits on his throne. It says its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. I want to take just a second and tell you this, that God's judgment, God's wrath, it extends to all people. We are all destined for hell. We are all filled with sin in our lives, and we deserve punishment. We deserve separation from God. But God, in his love and in his mercy and in his grace, he sent Jesus Christ to this earth to take on the sin that we deserve, to take on the death that we deserve, and take our place and die in that place for the perfect sacrifice. And the blood that Jesus shed covers that sin, and through that, we are made righteous in the sight of God. Not by anything that we do, but by the blood of Jesus Christ. We are nothing. We are separated from God for eternity because of sin, but Jesus. But Jesus.